the week. I know it's a little bit late this week. I was traveling, had some laptop problems. All that's resolved now. So it is now time to bring you Mouche versus Tobboo, a wonderful game that came from the ETS Invitational this weekend. This is the semifinals matchup. It was actually a team kill. Initiation, given the fact that they're both on Team Eternal Titans. So that team, of course, did really well over the course of the event. So let's talk about the decks that were part of this match. Tobboo is going to be playing a big Combrei list. I understand that Mouche had a big hand in building this particular version of the deck. I should note that the compositions of the decks might be a touch off normal, given the fact that the decks were designed for a 3-deck format, a Conquest style format. So I think that they're more or less the same, but maybe something like the Seek Power missing might be a result of that kind of a change in some of these cases. But anyway, so the composition of this deck, it's a big Combrei list. You might have seen some of these recently on ladder. I know that Mouche has been popularizing this, and some others have been following it as well. Basically, it's a shell of some good Combrei stuff. It has the Martial Ironthorn, a Mystic Ascendant combo in it, and then also has access to the Vodacon in the market if the game gets to that point. Not a lot of interaction here, but you also don't need it because you just have big, stupid bodies, which can hit people really hard in the face. Also, Sword of Unity, absolutely spectacular card. I think everybody has figured this out by now. This is, of course, a lesson that Alessi taught us really well, but this deck does not play Alessi, notably. Cards that are in the market: Find the Way, Scorpion Wasp, Sword of Unity, World Bearer Behemoth, and Vodacon, which is an interesting composition. It'll come up over the course of the match that this is the cards that Tobboo has access to. So this is the look of his list. Nothing too crazy going on here. I guess for the Great Parliament is a little bit unusual, and the lingering influence as opposed to the Seek Power. But other than that, I think this is a more or less standard ladder list after the iterations that were done by this team. So that's Tobboo's list. Let's take a look at Mouche's list. Now, this is a removal pile style deck. I understand that this was heavily inspired by Kamado. Unsurprisingly, this is very reminiscent of the sorts of decks that it's been playing on ladder for a long time. Has 3 Ikaria in the main deck, 1 in the market, 3 Risen in the main deck, 1 in the market, and the 4 Ixton merchants as well, and then just a bunch of removal spells. Some interesting little twists on this that maybe people haven't necessarily seen before. We have the 4 Annihilates, which is quite good in a teacher-heavy meta, which this still is. We also have the 4 Wanted Poster. This is an unusual inclusion since it was nerfed to 2 power, and I really think that this card is actually underrated right now. If people aren't playing it, then I think that this win by Mouche, and he ended up winning the whole tournament. If for those who don't know, spoiler alert, I'm sorry. But yeah, so Wanted Poster is a card that I was playing as a result of the advice of Kamado, actually, and I was really impressed by it. The meta has a lot of cards that are vulnerable to Wanted Poster plus Annihilator, Wanted Poster plus Torch, and that's a really great combo for initiating things moving forward into the game. No threats really in the deck other than the Ikarias and the Risens, and then, of course, the market copies of those as well. 1 copy of Saturate Maiden, which is a wonderful niche inclusion to fight back against Dawnwalkers or Scream decks or something like that, and it's just an annoying blocker to deal with, and you'll see that as with the Combrei deck as well, that this is a kind of card that they sometimes can be frustrated battling through, since the Aegis that you get from something like the Sword of Unity does not help you to battle past it. So that's the composition of this deck. Another, I guess, brief note on the Privilege of Rank: 3 copies of this. This is a card that has impressed me as well. The Granite Waystone, 4 copies of it. This is something that I personally find is a little bit heavy, and for my tastes, it makes the power base, the influence base, a little touch inconsistent for my liking, but it does give you some good access to the extra card advantage, which is one of those things that this deck is just really trying to get as much card advantage as possible when you don't actually have true card draw effects, especially now that a stash has been nerfed. But anyway, let's get into the game. There's a little bit of differences that'll be here in terms of what we're going to see in the course of this game compared to some of the previous episodes of Game of the Week, partly because there isn't a central theme that I picked out of this game that I thought was worth drilling down on. It was just a really interesting game. There were some interesting decisions on both sides, so it doesn't necessarily need to be that there's going to be the super targeted theme in the game. Just some really good play on both sides. I felt that this particular game. The other thing that I'll note is that there's going to be some moments when I do speed up a little bit. These players are both very good, but they're also very thoughtful. That's a good way to put it, so that they take their time in playing their hands and playing their cards to make sure they're not making any mistakes. This is also in the semifinals of the ETS, so maybe they're a little bit fatigued as well, and they want to make sure they're not missing any plays. So, as a result, there'll be some moments when we speed up the track a little bit and the video a little bit to make sure that any of the downtime we're not getting too deep into. And also, unlike last time, I did, of course, the play through the entire thing and go back and talk about the analysis. That I don't think will be necessary here, given the fact that there'll be plenty of time while they're actually playing the game to have that conversation. So, this is the first decision point in the game. We have Tobboo, who has access to a merchant on turn 3. What do you get from the market, though? Obviously, you want to play this out because for instance, playing out the initiative sands plus maybe holding up the desert marshal, not exactly particularly exciting. It's like kind of a low impact play. The marshal is on a great card in this matchup, so you kind of want to send that back to the market. So we have that opportunity now. Cards available in the market. We have Find the Way, Vodacon, Scorpion Wasp, Sword of Unity, and Worldbearer Behemoth. The cards that stick out to me as possibilities would be, I guess, Find the Way, but then the two other ones that are much more likely is the Worldbearer Behemoth and these Sword of Unity. And I'd be really interested to hear people's thoughts on what you thought was the correct choice in this situation. Be sure to comment below and follow while you're at it too. I'd love to have your support in that way for the channel. But anyway, for the Worldbearer Behemoth has the attraction of you get a turn 5 play, or a 5 power play, and if everything goes according to plan, you should be able to do that next turn. On the other hand, this is a card that's just really vulnerable to any given removal spell, really slows you down a good deal, and having access to that Sword of Unity is such a powerful card in this matchup. Find the Way, I mean, I'm kind of saying, like, maybe this is an outlier idea. You really want to get up to those higher power numbers, I guess, but you don't really have any reason to in this particular hand right now. Maybe if you had an access to another merchant and you thought you were going to get another Vodacon or something like that, that might be possible, but I personally don't think that was a good decision. I really don't know about this merchant for the sword play in this given situation, and I'll have to think about that one some more. But that was an interesting decision point at the very least. And so you can imagine that in the alternative situation, maybe the Worldbearer Behemoth is going to be set up for Annihilation for the following turn, given that there's the Annihilate in Mouche's hand. Now, we are going to get Call the Deck from Mouche's side. Obviously, he's not under a ton of pressure, so he can do this. He is going to be leery, though, about this merchant being able to power out something like the Worldbearer Behemoth. Mouche knows about this card is in his deck, given that it's in one of his decks as well, and they're part of the same team, and they also just have access to the deck lists. But so the interesting decision at that point, deciding not to hold up the Annihilate, which will then allow Tobboo to basically vomit some of his hand onto the board, power the Titan, play the Initiative Sands, and get a couple points of damage in. Given the fact that Mouche has not played a Quarry, he's only played the Call the Deck, means that we don't have any chance for a Harsh Rule next turn. You would have to actually remove one of the extra power, the maximum power producing units in order to stop the Sword of Unity coming down for the next turn. But Mouche does have the opportunity to do double removal spell on this turn of going Annihilate plus Torch to kill the Initiative Sands, if that's what he wants, which will turn down the aggression that would be possible with the Sword of Unity. Now, the Sword of Unity, I think he is probably expecting, given this setup. It feels like Tobboo is trying to go wide under the situation, and so I would imagine him trying to say, like, yeah, I like the idea of getting that extra power off the board for the Initiative Sands and slowing things down. It's possible, of course, to leave up the Torch. It should be noted, of course, I didn't mention this in the course of the rundown initially, that Tobboo is not playing a Stand Together in his deck or in his market. So that would be something that would be a vulnerability, potentially. But yeah, we are going to get the obvious play there. The Torch is going to be popping at slow speed. No real reason to hold it up one way or another of slow or fast, as far as I can tell. But yeah, so we are going to get the Sword of Unity on the Merchant. And this is one of the plays that I think is a really great play from Tobboo, of just being able to say, like, yeah, no, 6 damage a turn is pretty good. and you don't have to get a huge board with Sword of Unity in order to apply a lot of pressure, especially against a deck like Mouche's that doesn't do a lot of blocking. So he doesn't even think about it particularly hard, just goes for it, sets up for a future Sword of Unity, which will really, really slow things down, and it's so hard to block this down. But of course, Mouche will have access to the Merchant, which can get you something like the Statuary Maiden, which is an interesting possibility in the upcoming turns. So Mouche is, of course, now posed with that same position of wondering what to get from the market with the Merchant. The options that are available is Ikaria, Risen, the Boar, the Great Sword, and the Statuary Maiden. The one that seems to make the most sense here is the Statuary Maiden, given the fact that they don't really have enough power to play out the bigger units. Risen especially is not particularly good on this board, and the Ikaria would be the one that would be much better, but you don't really have the power for that just yet. That would take a few turns to get out. And then the Statuary Maiden is a great layup time, a great stall for the intermediate turns between here and there. Tobboo has a really interesting decision now, though. Are we going to play out the second Sword of Unity, get a lot more aggression on, maybe play it on the Temple Scribe to get two things across, or is he going to play out the second Merchant in order to try and set up a win through going a little bit wider? That does mean that you can't attack as easily this turn, which is definitely a downside, but there's going to be a little bit of a counteroffensive here, and especially I think that in the case of knowing that the Merchant came down, there's a reasonable possibility that the Maiden is in hand. Now, this is a really interesting decision here, where Tobboo decides to get the Scorpion Wasp right now, which I think is an interesting line that not everybody would take. This is, I think, really playing for tempo. It allows him to play out the Scorpion Wasp end of turn, and then play out the sword on something, and then get a lot more pressure across. In this situation, you would be more interested in saying, like, hey, that gets you to 7 power, that gets you to Vodacon power. That sounds pretty good, right? Well, maybe, but it also is vulnerable to single point removal, and you're giving up a little bit of tempo in that situation. This is a really bold play by Tobboo, for the record. I think that it's probably correct. It's hard to tell, but this is a really unusual line, I think, to the average observer. At least in my mind, that wasn't the play that I was thinking of when I first saw this. But yeah, that it does have the perfect power that's available in order to play it out at the end of turn, play the Sword of Unity, and continue the aggression. And especially in the air, if you suspect that you have a Statuary Maiden on the other side, given the fact of the way that the turn sequences have worked out in the last couple of turns. And we did know that your opponent had access to the Statuary Maiden in the market. So now we do have the decision point for Tobboo of whether or not to play out the Wasp at this point and then try to maintain that aggression. I was going to double check his thinking, make sure that that's the line that he wants to go with, and maybe planning out where he's going to be playing the Sword of Unity the following turn. In the end, he of course does play it out, draws a power for the turn, obviously not particularly impactful. Now has to decide what to do with this Sword of Unity and exactly where he'll be placing that, which he ends up placing on the second Merchant, which is a particularly difficult decision, I think, given the fact that there's a lot of possibilities of maybe playing it on the Wasp, get a little bit more aggression into the game through the skies, maybe playing it on the Temple Scribe in order to get that into first damage and maybe force that to be traded with the Statuary Maiden or threaten it. So as not to quick little point in terms of some tight play here as we get the double block on the Merchant in order to minimize damage taken. This puts Mouche down to a total of 6, which is not a particularly high life total, especially when there's a flyer and a board that's a little bit wider. So definitely in a lot of trouble right now, and then there's no clear counter play exactly that's like just immediately obvious. So I think that this situation means that Mouche is going to have to work pretty hard in order to fight back. So let's see what he ends up doing. He does, of course, have access to the Merchant, which is quite good in this situation. Now, the Merchant doesn't combat the 4/7 merchant that's on the other side particularly efficiently, but it does give you access to maybe something like an Ikaria, maybe a Risen to gain some life. There's a lot of possibilities in that respect. I think that the Hammer is a particularly interesting choice in this situation, as it does also get rid of the 2/2 flyer. The Slay, of course, is greatly diminished by the fact that there aren't any slayable targets quite yet, given that there are a bunch of Aegis units in play. The arm, the weapon that we get out of from the Saturated Maiden, that is not great here, as it doesn't allow any clean, profitable blocks, which was just the one. Now, if you did play it out in this situation, it would allow you to single block either the units in play. We are going to get the merchant out though, and this is a great application of it in this situation. I think that we're going to get it. Yes, we get it exchanged for the Ikaria. I think this is a really good play by Mouche. One of the things that he has to find is a way to sort of end the game and develop a threat in play that can actually block the Tobboo's advances with some amount of efficiency. This allows for a double block on the merchant that we have in play, which is quite useful in given this board state, and it wouldn't even kill the Ikaria. And then you also start generating the work right advantage, and maybe that hits something that's powerful, so that's quite good. There's a lot of ways in which you could imagine trying to find a way to play scared, but there was some, a lot of great options in the market at that situation, given that the Saturated Maiden had already been used. Something like a Boar obviously doesn't do a ton. I mean, I suppose it's possible to bore down the Aegis and then get rid of the sort of unity, but definitely not great. Tobboo does play out his merchant, and that gives him access to the Vodacon, which will be potentially very powerful, although Mouche's hand is obviously loaded with removal spells, which are good at combating units that don't have Aegis. So I'm going to play that out. Obviously, it doesn't have any attacks, given the fact that we have the 5/5 and the 3/3. You could attack with both the merchants, but that really doesn't accomplish a ton. Gains you some life, which is obviously Tobboo's issue in this situation. Now, Mouche does have, I think, a really fascinating decision here. He has the opportunity to attack with the Ikaria, play the power, slay the merchant, play harsh rule. It's playing a little bit scared, though. He has the decision instead to just say, you know what? I think that I can handle this 4/7. I think that there's just no way, really, for him to clear out this Ikaria. And as a result, I am just going to play out the Slay. Now, obviously, the Titan would have been a good counter to this, but we do get the Ikaria that comes as a follow-up, which is a wonderful play. Also, should be noted, the Mouche sequenced the play in such a way where he first attacked with the Ikaria, then played the Quarry, which is a wonderful little application to make sure that you maximize your chances of getting a big buffed unit from it, which sometimes you want to do one or the other. Maybe if you're thinking about against a removal-heavy deck that you want to spread out the buffs between different units, this is definitely a situation where you want one big, healthy unit, since your opponent really can't attack past it, per se. Now, it may look like Tobboo is really against the ropes, that really games falling out of his hands, but it should be mentioned that Mouche is still at 3, and literally any unit that he gets off of Suraf could provide a lethal attacker. Mouche doesn't draw a real unit, is lucky enough, though, to get that Grenadin off of the Waystone, so just barely staying alive. It's sometimes easy to lose sight of that because there's this big Ikaria in play, but yeah, Mouche is still at 3, and an alpha attack on the next turn would have actually been lethal. So, really incredible there. Of course, we're going to continue getting rolls off of the Suraf here. Now we get an 8/8, bringing Mouche out to 2. This is really, really close. But the Nightfall trigger does end up giving him access to a Risen, which is a huge deal in helping to gain a little bit of life back, and can kill that little baby Ikaria that's in play. So, well, it really does look like the game is slipping out of the hands of Tobboo. Like, Mouche is still in a lot of trouble. Now, it does feel like Mouche is considering here whether he has any other options. I don't really think that he does. Is going actually going to decide whether to attack or not with the 15-15. Doing some math, of course, to see whether there is a lethal block on the Ikaria that's available, but is going to make a decision based on the scout right now. Unfortunately, I don't know what it was that he was scouting, which would be an interesting decision to consider, but don't have access to that right now. But yeah, there's obviously as well a ton of rolls that you could get off of Seraph that would probably end the game right now. I think, maybe a Heart of the Vault would be pretty good in situation to roll out off of it. I don't know. There's probably more that I could think of, but really tenuous position, and he's been at such a low life total for such a long time. Is attacking in with the 15-15. The opportunity, there is an opportunity for a multi-block across basically the entire team, which would probably involve sacrificing both the Titan and the 8H, which is a little bit too much of an ask. So instead, we're just going to get a chump block here in order to keep Tobboo from dying. So we then get the Risen, comes out, kills the baby Ikaria, and now the game is, I think, quite firmly in favor of Mouche, given the amount of power that's in play. Tobboo does draw the Great Parliament and decides to play it, and that might seem like a really obvious thing to do here, but there's part of me that almost feels like playing it out might be wrong. It doesn't do anything against the Risen. The Risen is going to gain a ton of health. You have no options against the 15-15 Ikaria, especially once your opponent is outside of lethal range. There's a part of me that just wants to say, like, okay, I'm going to roll the Seraph and maybe I get something stupid. And that's my path to victory. I don't know. I'm actually kind of tempted to say that. But anyway, we do get the Slay out of Mouche. This allows him to pick off the Titan, attack with his flyers, gain a bunch of life with the Risen, forced to double chunk block on Tobboo's side. And this is going to lead to a very quick end to the game shortly there afterwards. But yeah, this was a really tight game. If you actually go through, there's even a few little nuances that I picked up rewatching this a couple times of, like if this decision had gone a little bit differently, maybe things could have worked out differently. We do get one final defense here from Tobboo. Mouche does draw an appropriate removal spell. You forget to use it properly, but that's fine. Well, he does eventually win the game from here. But anyway, a great match here. Congratulations for Mouche for winning the whole Invitational, and thank you to the RNG team for putting this on. Of course, it was a lovely event and very interesting to watch. If you enjoyed this, be sure to follow and subscribe and like and comment. It really does help people find the channel and support what we're doing here at a+space Games. Check out the Patreon as well. There's a description, links to all of these things, and you can check out other content that's going on the site. There's other Eternal-related content, and there's Artifact-related content as well, if that's something you're interested in addition. But thank you so much for hanging out today, everybody. Take care.